Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar, and this week we are talking about probably our favorite topic, which is the present moment. And I mean, like, just recording this episode, I just feel a lot more present, and it feels you get a little kind of guided aspect to this episode. So that's like a nice little thing to throw in. I think that it's an endlessly rich topic, and it's always a pleasure to talk about. It's kind of infinitely important to talk about in a way, because the very aspect of talking about it reminds us to be present, which is what we talk about a lot in this episode, is remembering to be present and the importance of that. So yeah, really hope you get something from this episode. I hope you come out the other end of it feeling more aware, more present, maybe with some tools to just generally be more mindful in life. Yeah, but see what you think.
Yeah, and I think this was a good one. Lots of practical things from our experience of trying to enjoy the present moment, because it's something that's talked about a lot, and there's loads of different understandings of what that really means to be present. And like, is it, you kind of addressed, is it just to be completely devoid of thoughts, or how can you think and be mindful at the same time? And I think that was actually quite a valuable thing I've not heard talked about a lot. It was fun episode. So I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it.
I lied to you, George. I said that this quote was by, who did I say it was by? Remember?
𝗙𝗍𝗿 Chopra.
Yeah. I was actually given this quote in reference to the film Fu Panda. And it's a quote from a tortoise in Fu Panda called Master Oogway. And yeah.
I was just gonna say, it's funny because like I kind of dislike 𝗙𝗍𝗿 Chopra from hearing him speak. I'm not sure also if it's I've just heard Sam Harris talk shit about him. Maybe that's like persuaded my opinion a bit. But like, yeah, that was definitely like coloring my perspective of the quote. I was trying not to let it, but I was like, this guy. Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm glad it comes from an animated tortoise, not that guy.
Yeah. I shall read out the quote. So you have to imagine an animated wise tortoise saying this. Yesterday is history, tomorrow a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. I heard this quote actually in the last week, and I've just come off a week-long meditation retreat in the Scottish Highlands. And we were talking about what this quote is talking about on this retreat, about presence, about the illusion of future and past. And someone gifted this particular quote. And I really liked that it was from Fu Panda. The reason why I sent over to George that it was 𝗙𝗍𝗿 Chopra, who's a sort of pseudo-scientist, spiritual teacher, was just because when I looked it up online, then that was what I could highlight and copy over to him the quickest. The Fu Panda didn't come up as the top source of that quote. So anyway, yeah, we're going to imagine it's tortoise. If you are an avid fan of the show, you'd know that this wasn't the quote that I picked for this week. I've, in fact, been a bit cheeky and switched out the quote that I picked for this week for the one that I just read out. And the reason being is I've come off a meditation retreat and I wanted to talk about presence. I wanted to talk about something a bit more spiritual. The quote that I'd originally picked was very practical, habit development-y, and it just didn't feel applicable in my current mental states after retreat. So we're going to be talking about the present moment again. The present moment is one of those ones that you can never get bored with. You're not allowed to get bored with, because if you're bored, you're not being present. So it's just one of those nice topics that is always fresh, and we could always do with a reminder of presence and of mindfulness. I think it's one of those infinite topics, and it's really fun to talk about. So I just wanted an excuse to talk about mindfulness. And just as a little disclaimer for a bit of word usage, I often use the word awareness and mindfulness interchangeably, and quite often I will actually veer more towards the word awareness just because it's got less baggage than mindfulness. Mindfulness for me has a lot of associations with the mindfulness movement, headspace, this term that's sort of thrown around as being something that can just kind of slot into your day to just improve your well-being that little bit. And that's doing what mindfulness really is a disservice, I think. So I kind of like the word awareness or becoming aware. And the final thing I'll say about this quote, for just before kind of opening up, is I think the vibe of this quote, I like that as well. It's just like, it's a little bit kind of soppy and lighthearted, and I just kind of liked. I like that it's got that kind of vibe to it. It's not too serious. So yeah, that can kind of kick us off. I wonder what you. I know you had a tainted perspective on this quote, but forgetting that aspect, you can shave that off now because
Now it's just a little tortoise who said it.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you did change it to this quote, because I've actually had been thinking a lot about this week, and I had at least, after kind of thinking about this, before you changed the quote, this was why you were on retreat. I was thinking about basically the same thing. I was just asking myself, like, what is the point of life? I was just having a kind of, just sat on my bed doing kind of don't quite know what to call it. It's kind of like a meditation. Sometimes I'll do it. I'm kind of meditating. I'm kind of like asking myself some questions of things that I'm curious about or want to explore more. And it's just like a really interesting way to, explore ideas and think about things. So I was doing this, like, think about like, what is the point of life? And I was thinking like, well, you've got you have the past and the future, which you're never really living in. Those aren't the point of life. So if you say you've got like an idea of your goals and things that you want to achieve in the future, those things are never the point of life. The point of life is things that are happening right now. All of those goals, say if you've got a goal that you want to realize, and then there's going to be a point where you're kind of realizing that goal, and then that's the point of life. Or when you're doing whatever you're doing, that is the point of life, because that is the point where life happens. It's in between those two things, in between the past and the future. And just really like thinking about this and realizing that the only place that you're going to get satisfaction is right now, in this moment. It's the only place it exists. It's so easy to get caught up in thinking that it's somewhere else and thinking that it's going to be in the future, or just ruminating in the past. And it really is just the gift of the present moment. It really is right here. Like, this is the point right now. And wherever you are, that is the point. And I just had, it's ideas that I've thought about plenty before, but for some reason, just this kind of rewording of it, or this rethinking of it, really kind of sparked it inside of me. And especially for like the next couple days, I think I was like really focused and really found it super easy to get back into this state of like real appreciation of the present moment. And it's something that can be tricky to stay in, to like stay in that pocket. And, I find that in general with all sorts of different, self-development ideas or things that you focus on, that it's very hard to keep them consistently. You'll have a new way of thinking about something and it changes your experience for a little while. I remember ages ago, there was a habit, which was just, I watched this little video, which was called Do It Now. And it was just a little thing like reminding you, if, I don't know, if you want to say like there's some dirty laundry on the floor and you're going to walk past it and think, I'll do it later. It's like, no, do it now. And this was just like a little trigger, for all these different things of like, you walk past the washing up and you're like, do it now and just get it done. And it was like a very liberating thing, but it only lasted for a certain amount of time, it felt. I think there's some residual, but it is a strange phenomenon. I guess it's not super related to this quote, but it's a strange phenomenon how you kind of get these little things that really resonate with you and can really change your experience positively for often like a fairly short amount of time. And I think they do have an undercurrent of improving your life in general, but that real active time can be hard to hang on to, or hard for that to remain consistent. But yeah, I feel I'm kind of been rambling about a bit, but yeah.
Well, no, it makes me think of a little thread that I was thinking about in relation to this, which is that despite the importance of the present moment and becoming, well, not just the importance, but the very fact that it's the only place where life happens, it really is the stage of life. There's no other stage where life happens. This is it. So yeah, it's not just an important aspect, it is the aspect, it is the place. Despite that, as you say, it's like you can get a wave of inspiration or get momentum with your awareness and become more aware, and it feels very vivid, it feels very rich, and it also probably comes along with quite a strong story of like, I'll just do this all the time, or that like, this is fine, I've sorted it, cracked it, this is it, I'll just be present from now on. Like, why was I doing anything else? And I've gone through those cycles so many times because mindfulness and presence is, has been a very important to me, or an ideal of mine for a long time. And yet it's definitely not my lived experience. I wouldn't classify myself as a very mindful person. Like it's something that comes and goes in waves of inspiration. And it's one of those things that I have an idea for myself that I want that consistency. Like, that is important to me. And yet that's not my experience. So I was thinking about, why does that happen? Despite the importance of it, why does it happen? And actually what I've noticed, particularly in the last couple of years, has been that a lot of it for me has to do with my level of general underlying suffering in life. So in Buddhism, this is called Dukkha. And it is this kind of undercurrent of suffering that is quite intrinsic to being alive. And it's something I think we were talking about last week, but the sense of that suffering, and then as a result of that suffering, or the cause of it even, it's like my thought cycles are quite negative. For example, say I'm really, really suffering, my thought cycles tend to be negative. If my thought cycles are negative, then I am living in a world that is quite depressing or quite unhappy, because our thoughts and feelings are our world. They literally create the world that we experience. It's like wearing colored glasses. Everything is through the filter of our interpretations of our thoughts about it. There's not an objective reality that we're seeing. It's based on our conditioned thoughts, right? So if I'm having a particularly negative thoughts, there comes a point where I will get sick of it. It just hits a point where it's just like, this is unbearable. And it doesn't need to be like I'm not able to get out of bed kind of unbearable. It's just when it becomes too loud, those negative habitual thought cycles come a bit too loud. And I am in a position where I have a lot of tools to work with suffering because of the sort of stuff that I've read and practiced for a number of years. So I know what to do. I know what to do with my thoughts, and I know what to do with suffering. And one of the primary tools that I have is to become more mindful, to literally just become more present. Because becoming more present, it means not being quite so caught up in, and this is another kind of Buddhist word, but it's quite a nice one, prapancha. So prapancha is like, it's sort of like trains of thought that are kind of just rumbling on kind of trains of thought, like one thought to another, and they all just kind of link to one another, and you're just on it, you're kind of just being swept up by thought, and that's kind of prapancha. It's just this like consistent kind of cycles of thought. And when I become more mindful and more aware of my senses and what is actually happening around me, that kind of prapancha dies down, that those thought cycles have less energy given to them. And when the thoughts die down, I suffer less, because this world that I'm creating that is difficult, and people are difficult, and I've got the future tomorrow and it's stressful, and I have my regrets, and all of that dies down along with my thoughts, right? And when those kind of thoughts die down, I become mindful. I'm like having that thing of like, I've got it. I just always do this. This is great. Like, I feel happy. My problems are largely solved, because most of them were just ideas that I had about the future that most likely won't even happen. Things are great. And I'll be like that maybe for like a week, right? I'll be on this kind of high of just like being more aware. And then this interesting transition happens where the thoughts I start having are quite positive, because I am feeling good. Like, my body feels good. I feel well rested. So the thoughts that start bubbling up, because of those conditions of my life feeling better, the thoughts I start to have are nicer. They're nicer thoughts. And I start thinking like, these are not bad. This is all right, really. These thoughts, no, this world's fine. This world that I'm making, this is all right. People are happy. Everyone's getting along. I'm feeling good about things. I can just spend a bit more time in here. Like this is all right, really. And then I'll just start going into thought just as I did before, because I'm like, this world, this kind of thoughtscape is fine. This is fine. And then before I know it, then I'm just completely unmindful again and just like back in the thought world. And then gradually those thoughts become more negative. And then the cycle can, just goes round again. And that's really quite a funny kind of cycle that I've noticed happening within myself. And I don't necessarily have an answer for it other than I have to find a motivation or an incentive to be mindful that isn't just based on that I'm sick of what's going on. There has to be something more overarching in my life that makes mindfulness just more of a priority even when I am feeling good. Because currently I'm just waiting for suffering to motivate me to be mindful, but I need other incentives basically. So how that's going to look, I don't know. But yeah, that's a kind of common cycle of mine.
Why do you think you need like other incentives besides that to be more mindful?
Because if my only incentive is to reduce suffering, then this cycle just continues, because I will be suffering, I'll become more mindful, suffering is reduced. When suffering is reduced, then that incentive to be mindful is gone, and then I lose my mindfulness, and then I'm suffering again. So there's not a consistent incentive outside of just how I'm feeling.
Because I think like I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, but like, don't you think you're going to need to think at some point? Like, you can't just be mindful the whole time and not having any thoughts. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying like that.
But just it'd be good to
to
like clarify that of like what that would look like.
Okay, so say if I'm having a particularly mindful period, I'm feeling motivated and I'm invested in becoming more aware, then how that will look in my life as an experience really is that I am remembering to be present more of the time. So it's not that I'm not thinking, because you can have thoughts and be mindful at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. Like you can be, because if it's literally just an awareness, like that's what mindfulness is. It's the difference between mindfulness and non-mindfulness, or awareness and lack of awareness, is lack of awareness or lack of mindfulness is you totally lost in whatever thought stream is happening at that particular time, whatever projection is happening at that time, and losing touch with the rest of your senses and the rest of your experience. So just being completely lost in your phone or completely lost in the future, it means you just lose touch with all the other aspects of your sense experience, for example. And that's the predominant human state, I would argue. Whereas becoming more aware is not a case of, I think thoughts do quieten, but they exist there. But there is an awareness of thought alongside awareness of vision, alongside awareness of sound and the body. And they exist in this broader space of just being aware of them, of simply having a very gentle but consistent knowing or alertness to all the different things, including thoughts that are happening as you go through your life. I think if some people might have the view that mindfulness is a lack of thought, or you're kind of going beyond thought. As far as I understand mindfulness and have been taught about mindfulness, you can be mindful of thoughts. It's not that you stop thinking. There might be a quietening, but it's not stopping thought. So I don't know if that does that kind of clarify.
That's good. So like, you could have the example of, say, well, even me, when I was going for a morning walk, when I was like feeling super mindful, as I was walking, I'd have thoughts pop in of like, oh, this is awesome. And and also things like, I mean, I guess this was kind of tied into it, because it was partly me trying to kind of keep myself in that mindful state, or kind of enhance it, of me, repeating the thing about, this is the point of life right here. Like saying that to myself, because I think that you can have thoughts that actually help point you and focus your awareness and keep you in that state. There's some that just seem to, I mean, all the thoughts just arise, but like there's some thoughts that seem to just arise there that you didn't conceive of, and there's some where it feels like your intention is behind them, like you've got the intent to deepen this experience of presence as you're, you know, going on a walk or something. That's an example, I guess, of thought and how that can interact with being mindful. You know, you can have the thoughts which are reminding you to stay in that state, and then, you know, the other things that are going to pop in, which might be to do with your environment around you, of, you know, thoughts of appreciation for what is right here, your current experience, about what you're seeing visually or what you're feeling in your body, all sorts of different kind of little comments about what's happening and your feeling about what's happening. And then also there can be thoughts that come in which might be about more abstract things. And by abstract, I just mean things that are not in your direct experience right now. Thoughts about things you need to do later that day, or things that you might be concerned about. And those things naturally will come in, and quite often they may be things that you actually do need to pay attention to. You can't just ignore those thoughts completely or just like let them float away. But I guess it's good to have an awareness that those are the sort of thoughts that when you start following them, they can take you off on a different path away from the present moment. And you can kind of get a little bit sidetracked. And then, you know, there's certain types of thoughts that have that nature to them that are more likely to end up with you getting wrapped up in some story or drama that takes you away from appreciating the moment right now. One like really great habit that I've had that really helps deal with this is I have like an app called Todoist, which is where I record all of my tasks and any things that I need to do. And I'm good at just recording anything in there. So like if I am on this walk and I think about something that needs to be done, if I've already got it written down in my list, you know, I'll know like, oh no, it's fine. I don't need to think about that. I know I've got it in the list and it's scheduled for Thursday or whatever it is. Or if it's something where I'm like, shit, I don't have a record of that, I'm sure I'll probably remember. But when those things come up, it's so helpful to be able to just have a quick way to record them, stick it in the inbox of this app, just quickly write down a thing of like, make sure to get soy milk from the shop, if I've just thought of that on my walk. And now that I've done that, it's recorded in this place where I'm gonna, you know, have access to it when I need it. And that thought doesn't need to come back. The thing is, you know, those thoughts will just keep going back. If it's something that's unresolved, that's often why they pop in. It's like, this is a problem. You need to do something about this. You need to do something about this. And you can't do this for everything, but often these little issues that your mind brings up, if you can just record it in a place where you know that you're going to get to it and you can resolve that thing at a time that's appropriate for it, then that really does help those thoughts stop coming in. And, you know, this process, it's something that I kind of got from Getting Things Done, which is a kind of productivity system that I know you've used quite a lot before as well. And I found that is actually that does really tie in very practically to living a more like mindful, aware life and spending more time enjoying the present moment. Like it's actually not something that's mentioned a lot, but it's a very practical thing that helps a lot with being able to stay more mindful and also not just neglect, you know, the things that you need to do in your life, just the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a really practical way of offloading some of those repetitive thoughts that are actually nagging you for a reason, because you have something that you do actually need to get done. I think it's an incredibly rich area, the area of mindfulness and becoming aware of what's going on, because our thought patterns and, you know, our ability to feel and our emotions are so complicated. Like really the sort of patterns that happen, it's so interesting. Like if you ever get a chance to go on a meditation retreat or sit for a longer period, just noticing how the mind kind of dances and how thoughts dance and what ends up pulling you away from your other senses is very, very intricate. And it's really, really interesting to see how the mind plays, you know, and what feels very sticky, you know, and you kind of get very snagged by a particular thought stream. and what is very easy to let go of. And there are lots of methods to working directly with thought. Now that I'm thinking of it, like one real quite simple rule with this stuff is that human beings are in general very top heavy. So as in we are like in our heads, and we feel that thought happens in our brains and somewhere behind our eyes. So as a general rule of thumb for mindfulness, coming back into relationship with the other senses, such as sound or the body, is a really good way to bring yourself back into the present moment, because you can almost guarantee that there is a imbalance towards thought, that thought is taking up most of the kind of energy in the moment, and it will be thought that is taking you elsewhere, into the future, into the past, into fantasizing. That's pretty much a guarantee. So the art of mindfulness is remembering. It's synonymous with remembering. You remember the present moment. You forget and then you remember. And when that remembering happens, i.e., while listening to this episode, just after this episode, when it might be fresh in your mind to become more aware, become more present, when that thought of, oh yeah, mindfulness comes up, that's the opportunity, because you're remembering. So you remember, and then you can come into the body, you can come into the other senses, because you will be lost in thought, and then you remember, and then you come back into the other senses. And that's really the process of becoming more aware, becoming more mindful, is how your relationship with your other senses that are so rich, that have so much to offer, how much that changes. And I think that's for me, is like, even though I notice I have certain trends in terms of how intense my mindfulness is and how often I kind of come back to it as a theme of my spiritual practice, over years of it being there and going through these cycles, I'd say that my ability to remember, to be mindful, and my ability to come back into my other senses has become a lot stronger. So I'm able to just drop into my body very easily and see, oh, how am I reacting? Like, oh, my body, my stomach's tensed up when someone said that thing. Like, what does that mean? Like, I'm able to kind of go in, just tap into the other senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, feeling, all these other rich experiences that are happening that basically are ignored because of our tendency to be in thought. Being that we have this filter of seeing everything through thought. If you're listening to this, unless you have a very established spiritual practice, the likelihood is that you're lost in thought almost all the time. That really is just the kind of base setting of human beings. And I think a topic like this can be one of those things that's just like, oh, this topic's about mindfulness, and then we kind of go on to another topic, and it's another little bit of food for thought kind of thing. It just gets tapped into. You kind of weave in some little tips and stories about mindfulness from this, and then carry on as normal. But I think one thing that can be helpful is to have actually some insight into, well, I guess insight into thought. And one of the areas that this can be really interesting with is the future. So I just wanted to ask a few questions. So we have a sense of the future, we have a sense of tomorrow, and I just invite you really to bring tomorrow to mind. So you might have a plan of some sort, like what is happening tomorrow? Have you got work? Are you meeting people? What's the sense of, what does the day actually look like? What does it feel like? You could think about sitting down for breakfast. If you eat breakfast, like, can you imagine actually just sitting there eating your breakfast? Or if you maybe commute to work, you might sit on a bus, or you might go for a walk. So is that something you're going to be doing tomorrow? So this sense of tomorrow, I think for most of us, feels there feels like there's a different level of reality to that particular fantasy of tomorrow. Like we've got our other fantasies about things, about how things can happen. Some of them are realistic, some of them are not. But yet tomorrow feels like one of those fantasies that has more reality than any of the other ones. Is not just thought. It's something beyond thought. I know I've got enough data to know this is what's going to happen tomorrow. Basically, roughly, this is what's going to happen tomorrow, right? But with this reflection of what does tomorrow look like, all you're working with is a mental projection. It's just thought. If you have any other fantasies about like your life and how your life might look, the stuff that it's actually made of is the same as this idea is tomorrow. There's not, even like tomorrow in the future feels like something really real and tangible, but this is the only place that it exists. Is this imagination that you've just done. This is the only place it's ever existed. Is this ability to picture, to manifest, what does tomorrow look like? What's my plan? And that's the only place it's ever existed. It just can be very interesting to notice that it is just as real as any other fantasy you might have. It is just made of thought. The only difference is that it can be useful to know what you're doing tomorrow. That's the only difference. But in terms of its actual reality, you really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it is not going to exist as a fantasy, as a thought. It's going to exist as a present moment experience, which is a totally different thing. So yeah, that's just a little reflection.
I think it's nice to do these little like practical things. I don't know, I quite enjoyed it, just closing my eyes for a little bit and having to think about that stuff. Because I mean, like we said, that these are things that we've kind of thought about for a long time, really. And it is just a constant, returning to them. It's like a practice. It's bringing yourself back to the present moment. And one thing that I actually thought with this quote, to really bring it back to that, is how it says about the present moment is a gift. And it really is. I mean, it's incredible. And it's where life happens. It's the only place it ever happens. But I think the thing is that we can forget that it's a gift, because it's so consistent. It's always here. So, it's like Christmas every day. Like you get, you always get these like amazing gifts 24/7, to the point where you're just off thinking about other things and not, like thinking about what gifts you're going to get tomorrow, when there's like a gift sitting in front of you right now. Like it's the same thing. You're off thinking about something, like thinking about the potential of the future. You're living in that moment in the future. Like you're getting like a poor man's version of the present moment in the future. Like you're imagining like, oh yeah, I'm going to go here and then I'm going to go here. But like right now you're here. And that is the gift right there. So I think that metaphor does really work in that way, that it's something that's so valuable, but because we've got such an abundance of it, it is going to end, but it's existed for so long, it seems. We've got, you can't have any experience of not having it. So it's something that you just take for granted because it's always how it's been. But it's good to remind yourself like, oh yeah, this is a gift. Wow. This is pretty cool.
There's a lot of people that would, who are coming to the end of their life, who have very little time left, for using that concept of time, who would be thrilled to have the opportunity of, I mean, me and you are young, and I suppose it's hard talking about time, isn't it? But like thinking of just like what it is like to be here now, alive, healthy, like it is a gift. And the fact that we have our senses is a gift, you know, and it's not a gift that, I mean, some people really, really struggle with what's here and now and in the present moment. So if you're able to appreciate it, then that is an incredible gift. Yeah, it's yeah, and yeah.
Nice. Well, we just kind of trailed off into the present moment, and that seems like a fitting place to move on to my quote for next week, whatever next week is.
Yep.
So yeah, the quote for next week is from Christopher Morley, and it is, "There is only one success, to be able to spend your life in your own way." So have a good old think about that. I hope you have lots of presents this week. And yeah, if you want to share this podcast or this episode with anyone, that would be great. Thanks for listening. Have a good week. And oh wait, what am I forgetting? I think because we haven't done, like, we did a double episode the other week, so we haven't done one in like almost 2 weeks. So I seem to have forgotten how to end the episode.
No, that's it.
We could shout out. Well, yeah,
getting...
Instagram is knowwhatimean.podcast, and you can send us an email, link in the description. Is that a word?
Your brain is melting after this. Yeah. All your thoughts have died down into an abyss of nothingness. Just pure sense experience.
Yeah.
And got like a
word
baby's
salad.
yeah. Baby's sense of awareness, nothing left to say.
Yeah.
yeah. If you're watching the YouTube right now, then George is lolling. He's got his eyes bright open and can no longer speak. So, yeah.
Have a good week. Peace.
Bye.